SBOMs for cybersecurity. You know, we all know it's important. It's sort of the hot subject when it comes to providing cybersecurity detail and documentation. Simon, I look to you first. Talk to us about the current state of play when it comes to SBOMs and security.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Uh,
Can you hear me? Yeah,
Hello?
fantastic. Thank you ever so much, Keith. So I work for a cellular module manufacturer right now, and over the last 2 or 3 years, we've had a number of customers asking us about the software inside of our cellular modules. You know, what's in there, what kind of baselines from chipset suppliers we have, cryptography libraries, compression libraries, and it's oftentimes in the past been quite difficult to pull that information together. We've done it on an ad hoc basis to try and answer specific questions that our customers have had. But we've seen now with RED Cybersecurity having come in last year, thank you, RED Cybersecurity having come in last year, and with the CRA initiative coming in this year and being mandatory next year, we have to be able to answer these questions much more quickly. You hinted that in your introduction, that we have to respond quickly, and we can't spend weeks pulling together this information anymore ad hoc. We have to have a formalized process for doing that, machine-readable formats for sending out this data and having this data made available. And that's the state of play we have right now. We're moving forwards from ad hoc data gathering to having a formalized procedure for doing this. And this is what we're talking about today.
Yeah, indeed, the CRA calls for 72 hours, a response produced by whoever's liable, most likely being a manufacturer. That needs to happen within 72 hours of a breach.
Yeah, not 2 or 3 weeks, which is the sort of timing it was taking us before to pull this information together if we didn't have it. Now we expect to have this, if not available online, certainly within the 3-day response window available to our customers.
I'm going to jump around a little bit.
Yeah.
Daria, you were talking earlier about automation and the whole importance of that in terms of managing SBOMs and analyzing them. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Maybe to start with defining the state of play, I'm kind of surprised there isn't a line out the door to learn about CRA and what is happening and how to move forward on it.
It's a pretty good crowd, though.
It's a pretty good crowd. It's a pretty good crowd. You know, I come from the OT infrastructure world, and these folks are used to being regulated and have processes in place typically for some of these high-level assessments of your security. The CRA kind of introduces these new regulations and requirements that are pretty burdensome to do individually as an organization. And then when you bring in the fact that there are multiple different suppliers of an OEM, it adds a lot of complexity that really compounds over time. And that time is of the essence when you look at the 24, 72-hour response window and then the time to build a remediation plan within 14 days. So if you were able to achieve that individually within your own product team, could you do it again tomorrow when you release the next version? And could the team who's sitting 2 cubicles over from you also do the same thing with limited expertise on the market without having some kind of automation in place to be able to do that in a way that's reliable, in a way that's actually something that you can know what to expect from your third-party suppliers, use that as your reliable source of truth, and then do something that's actually defensible when you have some kind of risk that becomes in front of you. I'm maybe curious to pass it on to an OEM. What are you doing for something like this? How are you keeping up?
Well, thank you. Yeah, so my background is, so I'm working for Digi International, so we actually providing solutions that manufacturers integrate into their products, so they're building products with ours, and we also obviously manufacture ourselves. So CRA is a very important topic for us and our customers specifically. So because CRA is not coming, it's really already here. And so every product that is a digital element, is connected actually is subject to the CRA. And as Dario mentioned, if you build a product, you typically have multiple vendors involved, or that's on the software side, on the hardware side. All of those also have CRA obligations, of course, but at the end of the day, it's your product, your logo, you hold the bag for that final product, right? So it's very important that you look at that. And in general, as Dario also said, the clock is ticking. So on the 11th of September of this year, the 24-hour reporting window actually becomes mandatory. So, which is very interesting because the reporting window is this September. The SBOM mandate actually is next year. But you can see where the problem lies, right? So how can you actually have a reporting window that you can support if you don't have a good SBOM structure that you can actually, that helps you to define where your vulnerabilities are, you know? So that is a very important piece. So the SBOM is something that you should establish now if you haven't done that already. And also ideally, like Dario said, doing that in an automated way, right? So essentially shifting security left. So you have automation. You actually are looking, not getting involved into forensics. You actually want to have CVE lists. You want to fix the problems proactively so that you can actually catch it on the back end. Because it can be very expensive and problematic to do that on the back end versus the front end. And so that is a very important piece of the SBOM piece as well.
Great stuff. I want to take a step back and let you guys introduce yourselves, something I should have done in the beginning. Forgive me. So start with you, Simon, and we'll move right to left.
Yeah, so my name's Simon Mullinger. I'm actually from that booth over there. And I've been working in the cellular industry since 2008, since Siemens Wireless Modules spun their business unit out to create Cinterion wireless modules, and that's why you see Telit Cinterion on the booth behind you. Throughout almost all of that time, I've been either in a technical sales role or a field application engineering role. To me, they're more or less the same, to be honest, with different levels of technical skills. And right now, we have a team within EMEA, and the reason this is important to our team is I have a team of people here in EMEA, the FAE guys and girls, who are responsible for supporting our customers at the drop of a hat with their hardware and software queries. That's what we do day in and day out. So when I talked earlier in my first thing about the 3-week pulling information together, the 3-week window for that was for one product and one software version. And of course, as you guys know, that's the tip of the iceberg. We need to have every hardware version of our products, every software release of our products with its own SBOM and its own security vulnerabilities information, which I guess we can expand onto next. So yeah, I've been doing this for a while. And RED cybersecurity I found really interesting last year. It put a lot of pressure on us as a manufacturer, and I'd be really interested for a show of hands for how many people in the audience are device manufacturers or solution manufacturers that have been affected by RED cybersecurity or that kind of thing. Are you guys thinking about that at the moment? Does it affect you? Yeah, a few, yeah. So hopefully, you can see that if we can supply you with that information quickly in a machine-readable format, then you can answer your approvals queries and your customer queries earlier as well. So yeah,
Mike, I know you talked a little bit about your role at Digi, but talk to us about Digi and its role in the ecosystem.
Yeah. So as I said, Digi International, we provide a number of products, both commercial off-the-shelf products, gateways, as well as embedded modules, the software components that come with it. So that's my point when I was saying that we understand this CRA problem firsthand because we're building products ourselves. So we are, obligated to fulfill the CRA requirements. We sell product in Europe, but we also build products that our customers integrate into their product. So we have both sides that we're covering. And so in order to support our customers, we also provide solutions on the service side, security services, CVE scanning tools also, our embedded products also already create SBOMs, so the whole topic that we have today. So that you can actually have a good foundation to start looking after vulnerabilities. So that is generally how we're looking at CRA. We have a nice white paper also on our website that is very informative, that I can also only recommend.
I took notes when I read it.
Okay. And a couple of videos as well, so that can help you maybe depending on where you are with your knowledge and the urgency of CRA as well.
Dario, you're the one guy here who literally lives and breathes this all day long, so tell us about yourself and Finite State.
Thanks, Keith. Yeah, I do indeed live and breathe this all day long. I will be reading that paper and with my notebook ready to take some notes. It's always good. We always learn something new. I'm the general manager for the EMEA business unit for Finite State. Been in the cybersecurity and regulated industries for my whole career. Coming out of the OT world, which is the oil and gas and electricity and things along those lines. And so moving into product security was an easy fit over. And frankly, it's been an interesting ride to understand what folks are trying to accomplish. There seems to be this one theme across the industry, which is something that Finite State specifically was designed to achieve and bring to the market, which is that as producers of software-defined products, you are being required to produce more products faster with less people, more securely. How can you achieve that? And you couple that with the drought of talent in the market to actually achieve that, it becomes very difficult to do. So as each of these have mentioned, we also have a booth over in 3A. What Finite State does is essentially a platform and people to help manufacturers of software-defined products achieve those very lofty, hard problems.
Right, great stuff. Mike, you started to get into it a little bit in our first round, but you were talking about deadlines and things that the CRA is going to bring. But talk to us some more about what exactly is required for SBOMs under the CRA. I'm thinking, things like dependencies, formats, what have you.
Yeah. So in general, I think there's two major SBOM formats. One is Cyclone DX, and the other one is SPDX. So there is no real harmonized standard yet, but there is BIS guidance, the German BIS guidance, as well as US CSR as well, that focuses specifically on either of them. So I would say both of them are okay. They can also be converted. So I don't think there's any reason to wait for anything that's harmonized. Just look at the BIS guidance, in Germany or the US side, and I think start implementing that. Following that will give you a good head start and a good foundation that I will say will also apply to the future then as well.
Great. Dario, anything to add there? Just in terms of what's happening right now with CRA. Again, I know you guys are very involved in auditing people for that, analyzing the results.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to carry on a little bit about the state of play for what's required within a decent SBOM and some of the challenges that people are facing there. One thing that's really interesting is that there's a carve-out of CRA for medical devices and for automotive and things along those lines. Why am I bringing that up? Some of those carve-outs actually do have requirements for what a good SBOM looks like. So, as mentioned, and even CE RED has not requirements necessarily for an SBOM, but it has requirements for what type of assurance you must provide for end consumers of that SBOM. So frankly, there's really no reason to wait. But I do see one of the challenges right now is there is a lot of conversation around what good looks like that, frankly, I think is a waste of time. We already kind of know what good looks like, and we should just be moving forward to producing the best you can do, because CRA is not requiring perfection. They're actually just requiring something that's defensible. They're requiring you to write something down, do it, and then point back at what you wrote down and what you did, and say you did what you said you're going to do.
In fact, as I understand it, a lot of the product, maybe as much as 90% that is out there, CRA will allow for self-attestation. Is that
much of it will allow for self-attestation. And the tricky bit, though, is that when challenged, you do need to have the proper requisite documentation on the back end to achieve it. So, when I think about someone like Telit, who actually has these kind of lower level components that are critical to the operation of those systems, I'm kind of curious what you're being asked for from the tenders that you must go and win to actually achieve a business. What's being asked for? Like, what does good look like in what people are asking you for? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I've only seen a handful of SBOM queries until now, and they came out, well, the queries came in last year as a response to the RED cybersecurity initiative. So I assume that our customers, as they were going to their approvals and to their approvals houses, they were being asked for this SBOM information as well, and they were being asked to prove that the software that was in their product was secure, was known, all the CVEs and vulnerabilities were documented. And honestly, when these questions were coming in last year, or maybe the end of the year before, I'd never seen that kind of question. We had never seen that kind of questioning before. It seemed a little bit strange. But when you see the first SBOM, even though it's a machine-readable format, it's JSON files of values and library names and descriptions and stuff like that. As soon as you see something like that come in, you realize the level of detail that we are able to report with now and required to report with in terms of in terms of software libraries that we're using. We might use particular crypto libraries. I probably shouldn't name them all, but particular crypto libraries, compression libraries, parsing libraries, and of course, when we're building cellular modules nowadays, in the old days we built the chipsets ourselves when it was back in the Siemens time, but nowadays we take chipsets from some of the cellular chipset manufacturers, who will provide us with a baseline firmware for their chipset as well, which has a basic functionality, some basic AT commands and API calls, and we wrap around that our AT command interfaces or whatever other APIs our customers might expect to use in that black box module kind of environment. So the SBOM information that we have right now is all of that kind of Linux library information, compression libraries, crypto libraries and things like that, but also then critically from our chipset suppliers, their baseline information. So we won't name names right now, but the chipsets have very specific libraries associated with them, and every single version of our firmware will generate, of our modules, and the firmwares for our modules will generate a new SBOM. So it's not that we're going to have just 5 or 10 of these things out there. We're going to have hundreds and thousands of them in their life cycle simultaneously, I imagine.
Right.
Every one of our modules that we create has in this case, a Telit IMEI number, a unique mobile device ID, but all of the products going to the northern US have no IMEI numbers in them. They're programmable by the customers. So immediately just with that, we've doubled the number of software versions that we have just through requirements like that. When we go to Japan, Korea, Australia, we very often hit operators there that want their own version of the firmware as well. Mentioning no names, you can probably imagine who they are. So it's almost a combinatorial explosion of information we're supposed to provide. And each SBOM right now, just on the library information, is about 10 kilobytes of information. If we add the vulnerability information to that as well, we get to about 50 kilobytes of text, of JSON text per SBOM. And there are going to be thousands of them alive at one time. That's a long way around to answer your question, though, isn't it? Sorry. Press my stop button.
It's something that we're keenly aware of when we talk about developing a compliance tool. Just the exponential expansion of data, and it's obviously something we're going to have to get our arms around. That's why we're working with a group like Somos, who's used to dealing with those levels of data. Mike, I wanted to ask you, before we leave... sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe a quick follow-up, just to tie it back to your intro, Keith. One of the things that's critical is everything you just discussed really highlights the kind of Russian doll problem of
Yep.
SBOMs. You mentioned, Keith, that the database is at a SKU level. There's a reason for that. That's what CRA is going to require you
Exactly.
to report on. The SKU level contains multiple different components that come together to create that SKU.
That's right.
And so as you start unpacking the onion on this, it really can never end.
Right.
If you don't want it to end, it doesn't have to end. So eventually you have to draw a line for this is enough. I don't want to go down the dependencies of my dependencies of my open source of my dependencies. You don't have to, exactly. It's not required. But you do have to pick a line for like how deep you want to go based on how critical those dependencies are. And I think that's one of the challenges that as an organization, you each will have to choose where that line is that feels defensible and then do that. There is a requirement at the kind of maybe top level and maybe one or two down. After that, that's
Certainly
good.
something we're keenly aware of and just trying to get our arms around, trying to figure out where that line is.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I wanted to tuck back into Michael and talk about life cycle requirements under CRA. Talk to us about patches, updates, and the amount of time you need to hold on to the documentation.
Yeah, so I think again, having an SBOM story is a very important aspect of all this, of course, because you have to have a tool that actually allows you to see where your problems are, what your exposure is, and then being able to address them. But you might have a fantastic SBOM story, but you have no ability to actually update your product, so that's another challenge. The regulation is a little squishy, I would say, in terms of the update requirements. I think it mentions something like where feasible or if feasible, but that's a very squishy term, what feasibility means, right? So do you have to send somebody there with a USB stick? Do we have to replace it? Because if there's critical vulnerabilities, you have to address them in some shape or form. So one way of doing that, of course, because all of these are products with digital elements that are connected to a network, is if you have an OTA mechanism, then that certainly gives you the ability also to apply the fixes that you have found, actually address the vulnerabilities that your SBOM has helped you to uncover. So that is a very important piece, I think, is having an OTA strategy. I think is a very key aspect of all that, in addition to actually having a very sound, like I said, ideally shifting left on the security side, automation, being proactive, but having a story how to update your devices so you can actually address the issues.
Right. Documentation, how long you have to hold on to it? I mean...
10 years,
Wow.
in general for the SBOMs, and then 5 years after the product actually has been taken off the market as well. So that is something that you also have to keep in mind. And then also when Dario talked about automation, you mentioned it, it's like you don't want to do CVE scans once, right? So you have to do them continuously. You also have to do them to old releases, so you have to look back in your SBOMs. So having a strategy that actually does scanning, a one-shot scan is important first time, but then you have to keep scanning all of your SBOMs that you historically have that are still in the field, so you can actually address those issues as well.
Right. And surely the whole concept of updating OTA, and holding on to all of the data. And again, we talked about exponential growth in the amount of data you'll be managing. I'd imagine that's a major factor.
Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the over-the-air update thing. That's one of the reasons we thought originally the SBOMs could be linked to the product IDs, to the IMEI numbers of these cellular modules in this case. But of course, that won't strictly work because we have to link them to the firmware versions, because every time that vulnerabilities are discovered and they are patched and we do Delta firmware, we make Delta firmware updates available to our products, and customers may or may not decide to deploy those Delta firmware updates. The SBOM is going to change. The vulnerability profile or identity of the product will change. So we could have an SBOM for a product as it leaves our factory, but it's a life cycle management thing, as you were saying, as those over-the-air updates are made, and we strongly encourage you as customers of ours to always make sure you can do firmware over the air. And I know people hate doing that. It's very difficult. It's something that will become more and more important as we move to 5G, and we're going a bit off topic probably, but there'll be a lot more points of attack in the cellular networks as we move to 5G, just because of the infrastructure changes and the virtualization of the networks. You must get ready and really prepare for having good over-the-air firmware update abilities. It's no longer optional, maybe with the exception of NB-IoT networking, because it's very restrictive in terms of data, but everywhere else, definitely do that. And I hope that our SBOM management team, our security teams, do base things around software versions. I think that's what they will do, because that's the only way we can manage this dynamic life cycle of the SBOM information when it's out there. So I just wanted to add that to your point.
Dario, I want to shift gears a little bit. You and I talked before we got on the stage about the whole concept of filtering out bad data or insignificant data. Talk to us about accuracy and scalability in that regard.
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the key and critical components where you need some sort of automation to get you 80, 90% of the way there. So you need something like a binary analysis tool. We make ones. There's freeware options. There are options to get you started. Inevitably, though, every bit of those options will have some sort of noise, some sort of inaccuracy, something that you will need to attest to being accurate. When you actually make that attestation in your declaration of conformance, it's expected that you've reviewed and that you've made sure that it's actually accurate. So finding ground truth, you want to find something that gets you as close to 100% as possible, but then it is really important to actually have human hands-on to create that foundational knowledge that your SBOM is accurate. And then from there, you start doing those iterative scans, those iterative vulnerability monitoring and discussion. What is a positive versus a negative or a false positive is really something that your security team is going to have to identify, or you're going to have to work with someone to help you identify what good looks like. So defining that, I think, is probably like step one. Step one is figure out how to filter noise from actual truth and write that down and then just lock it in. Then you have to also manage and maintain that truth doesn't change, maybe with one of these OTA updates. Maybe you've added a patch that actually adds some functionality, and now that's a new product. And that's a new SBOM. And that's a new thing you have to report on CRA. In the previous SKU, you started a 5-year timer on the EOL for that thing. So this life cycle problem that, again, back to automation, is quite difficult to accomplish. So I wonder sometimes if the regulators decided to create a ton of job security for the cybersecurity industry, because it's just going to require this massive infrastructure to actually achieve. And one of the challenges with that is finding enough of these types of environments where you can actually get the word out. The other piece that I see is a major challenge for filtering is the source of the data. I mentioned binary analysis, but oftentimes one of the resistances that you get and one of the challenges is with intellectual property. So you have end providers who don't want to give you either a binary or they want to give you an SBOM and have you trust that the SBOM is accurate. If you can get over the intellectual property hurdle that they don't want to necessarily give it to you in the first place. So being able to trust your end provider of that SBOM to be accurate is something that essentially all you can really do is, from a risk perspective, is contractually obligate that the responsibilities flow down in risk as well. So that if there is a risk that is discovered through some sort of filtering or inaccuracy that they attested to be accurate but wasn't, you need to find a way to actually cover that in the future. So that's a really big, I think it's a huge challenge that can be handled with mentioning shifting left, is just shifting, not even left, just shifting the mentality to security being a team sport in the industry.
Right, right.
Mike has something.
Go ahead, Mike.
One thing, so I think, Dario talked about the noise filtering, which is very important. You do your CVE scanning, you look at the SBOM, you do the scanning, you get the results, or you actually feed the filtering into the scanning. The problem with that is, I think, well, you have to do the filtering, but there's also a huge responsibility, right? So because you decide what you filter out, right? So, and if you filter out the wrong stuff, you are the one who's responsible for that, right? So the whole thing is really a formidable can of worms, that you have to deal with. And I think there's also companies that can help you with that, probably also Dario's company. But there's also ways how you can get started, right? So there is even open source tools you can start with. Now the quality is maybe, something you have to keep an eye on. But there's tools like Sift and Gripe. So Sift can help you if you have even if you haven't dealt with SBOMs before, you don't have an automation or CI/CD integration. Sift can help you to look at an existing repo, create an SBOM out of it. It's better than nothing. It's open source. Keep it in mind. Then there is Gripe, also an open source tool that can then go through the results, go through the SBOM and do some scanning. And then you can also apply VEX files that actually do the filtering, right? So that is something that you could start today, actually, at least just to get your feet wet if you haven't done that. And some of those tools even allow you to do automation, CI/CD integration. But I think at some point you will most likely want to look for more professional tools, that actually have a better hit rate as well. But again, there's open source tools. And even for, we mentioned the one-shot scanning is important, sure. How can do continuous scanning? So Dependency Track, for example, is an open source tool that does allow you to do continuous testing, right? So those are all options that you have today rather than waiting, where you can actually start doing SBOM generation, scanning, see how that works, and then at some point you might want to upgrade.
Right. It's a good segue into an old IoT saying from our friend Harold Remmert, a Digi colleague, that security is not a destination, it's a process. And I'm wondering about integration of cybersecurity operations into workflows. I mean, do you see that happening out there? I'd probably turn to you first, Simon, on that. I mean, are you seeing that in the industry as you're dealing with it?
Right now, we are, honestly spoken, right now we're putting together the SBOM material for the products that we have and the firmware versions that are live in our products. But it sounds a little bit like adding the security to the product after we finish, doesn't it? So we need to integrate this from the beginning, from step one. So from our R&D teams, we need to have our R&D teams using these kind of tools or paid for versions of these kind of tools to generate and monitor this SBOM information from the source. So from wherever the software is being written on our side, we kind of also expect our suppliers to be doing the same thing and notifying us in real time of their analysis as well. And I don't think, unless you guys correct me, I don't think anybody's quite that advanced right now. So what I expect to have is a portfolio of products and all of the current live software versions for those products to have valid SBOMs associated with them. How clever and how, in terms of filtering and lifecycle management, the continuous monitoring of those will develop over time. So we're not there yet. We still have work to do. I think that's fair to say.
Right.
Yeah.
How do we? Sorry, go ahead, Darren.
Yeah. I want to maybe bring some optimism to the SBOM and security discussion. It's a requirement. We have to do it. But we've actually seen several clients take SBOM as an opportunity to improve their workflows because it's a requirement and because it brings multiple teams together. We've seen, I want to bring up 3 examples, maybe 4 examples of where you can use SBOM to do more than security, because I think this is really important. One, still kind of security, but not necessarily, is in provenance. We're seeing people append to their enriched SBOM information about where this particular code was developed. super important for other regulations around the world. So just because you're building something for CRA, what if you also sell that product in the United States? And they're asking you, can you please confirm where the product's components were manufactured? So provenance is another piece that you can add to your enriched SBOM that will give you a competitive edge in the market. The other place we see it is adding end-of-life dates to those SKUs. It's a really easy way to improve your lifecycle management for those products on the market. It also is something that you can't read from a binary. You have to get it from an SBOM that you're going to provide over to someone. And then the last piece is in appending team or business unit information. One of the places I saw that used is in a tier 1 supplier for the automotive industry, where they essentially sell and resell bits of their code to other parts of their business. So they might have a temperature sensor that they manufactured in one division that they're going to sell to another division, and then eventually someone in that division is going to need support on that code, and they don't need to guess where they need to go for that support. They built it into the SBOM, so in the lifecycle management tool, we have a way to expedite getting people to connect with each other internal to the organization. So these are opportunities that SBOM adds that weren't there before for teams to start collaborating with each other.
I'd just like to glom onto that with the note that we did very extensive surveying within the IMC about with the rank and file, and both from the supply side and from the manufacturing side, we saw a very strong majority of the people responding saying that they viewed cybersecurity for IoT in general as a revenue opportunity, and a competitive advantage. So, worth pointing that out. Sorry, Mike.
On the topic of good news, then maybe also somewhat on the CRA side, as you probably know, for example, when you look at the 24-hour reporting requirement, so the regulation, of course, has a certain stick that comes with it, so that you actually do what you're supposed to do. So there are fines involved if you don't follow up with your obligations, including the reporting windows that you have. Now, you might wonder how maybe a micro enterprise or a small, medium business is going to deal with all those requirements here. And so there is provisions for companies that are maybe 50 people or less, and I think about 10 million of revenue roughly, that actually relieves you from the fines, right? So you don't have to pay fines for missing those deadlines. Now you wonder, well, that's probably not a good idea because the stick is gone. Why would I do it then? Well, so that's the good news is that you don't have to pay the fines if you're a very small company. Well, the bad news that comes with it is obviously you still need to do it. And so two sticks are available. One stick is that, well, if you continue to miss your deadlines, your product might be banned to be placed in the European market. So that's probably an issue for you.
It's a pretty strong incentive.
That is one. And the other one also is that actually that there's a certain tendency also now that if you have issues with exploited vulnerabilities, if you have reported them, there will be a public site where you can actually see companies that have had issues. So you could call it outing, so that is another way to motivate people to actually do this, right? So, yeah, so there's a number of things that are there. Not all of it is financial, so the point is to not ruin people, right? So smaller businesses, but it does not relieve you from the obligations of the CRA in general, so.
Stick with you for a minute, Mike. Talk to us about the changing regulatory picture. Obviously, that's an issue. How are people supposed to prepare for SBOM management when we really don't know exactly yet what's going to be required? Am I right about that? I mean, I'd imagine that's a pretty big issue.
Well, yeah, like I said, I think we talked a little bit about before. I touched on it. So yes, when we talk about SBOMs, we talk about the SBOM formats. No, the standard is not harmonized yet. But again, you look at BIS, the German BIS. There's I have it here. Actually, is BSI TR 03183-2 that actually has guidance when it comes to SBOMs, so on the format. So the point would be, you don't have to memorize this, but the point is that there is already guidance there. US CISA has it as well. So that is what I mentioned before. It's the Cyclone DX, SPDX side of things. So if you follow that, if you know about that, the tools that I mentioned, either the paid-for professional ones or the open source ones, can actually convert SBOM formats too. So you're not necessarily putting you into a corner. So that's a way where you can get started today already.
Right.
You know, so you don't have to wait for harmonization.
In the same vein, Simon, talk to us about your customers today. I mean, do you have advice for them in terms of what they should be doing to prepare for CRA kicking in? You know,
Yeah.
in some ways, in mid-26, you know, we know enforcement's going to come later, but it's rolling quite quickly.
It is rolling quickly, yeah. So the Cyclone DX format is the format that I've seen our SBOMs being delivered in. So that's good to know. That's what we're using. And with the RED cybersecurity, as I said, coming last year, some customers were concerned by it. Lots of customers were enthused by it. But at the end of the day, everybody got on board. All of our products that we're selling in Europe are RED Cyber Secure now, and our customers didn't take too much consulting or too much. We didn't have to give them too much advice to deal with that. What they wanted to see from us were that our products were RED Cyber Secure, and they wanted to know a little bit about how they would approach their approvals houses. And I'm assuming the same kind of process will occur with the CRA initiatives and with the SBOM initiatives and this kind of thing, that it will be an approvals process issue. I'm hoping that's the way things will progress. That's what I expect anyway. And we can advise our customers on their approvals with regulatory bodies. If the bodies are asking for this information, it's going to be published anyway, I think, publicly available, isn't it? So this information should be available to the customers. I'm hoping less consultancy will be needed for our customers than it was even for the RED cybersecurity. We're going to provide that information from our side. They will, of course, have to provide similar information for their host applications, for their microcontroller code, and so on and so forth. But I guess that's a question for my co-panelists. Will this be an approvals issue, as RED cybersecurity was, or not? Will you have to have an approval for having valid SBOM data in your product or not? I don't actually know yet.
Short answer is no. Long answer is yes. The reason why the long answer is yes is, as I mentioned earlier, oftentimes it's going to be self-attestation. So we have some very large clients that are in very critical operated fields. For them, it is not self-attestation. Right. It's too critical, and they are absolutely required. We also have several clients that have quite a lot of product lines, that some of which are highly critical and a lot of which are not. And so all they really need to do is keep on file what their attestation would be, because when you do need to make a report of a vulnerability disclosure, that's a likely time that NISA is going to call you and say, can you just, by the way, give me the rest of your security plan behind that? So they're reserving the right to investigate if they would like to, and more than likely it won't be in NISA, in my opinion. And actually, our policy spearhead here is here, Robert. He might be able to answer this if you come by. It could be the relevant CCERT in the region where you're operating, because they're going to have more cybersecurity expertise to actually identify whether or not something is or isn't going to be critical to their particular locality.
Obviously, sorry, go ahead.
So, yeah. On that note also, so we talked about the 24-hour reporting window becoming mandatory 9/11. So we talked about reporting. So right now, there isn't a reporting platform, right? So there will be one, a single reporting platform, an SRP, that is scheduled to be available at the same time when the 24-hour reporting window will happen. So by 9/11, 2026, there will also be a platform. So if that platform is there, it has to be there, because that will allow you to submit issues or vulnerabilities to ENISA, and it will automatically also go to your country-specific one, right? So you don't have to deal with that. But just as a side note, there's a lot of stuff that's still in flux. so far, I think everything has been on time. You know, we can say that. But for example, that single reporting platform is not available yet. You know, so.
I think I read somewhere in one of the latest annexes that they're scheduled for July for testing, allegedly for testing. By September, yeah, it's the deadline is also the deadline, but we can at least start seeing if it works in July.
Before we go any further, I'd like to just turn to the audience and ask people if they've got questions. There's a lot going on when it comes to cybersecurity and IoT deployments. Any questions, thoughts from the audience? We've got one back here.
So, is it on? Yeah. I hear a lot of times people wondering, you know, when you talk about fines and who's responsible for CRA, a lot of people throw their hands up and go, well, I'm not, my name is not on the box. So at the end of the day, who is responsible for CRA? Who's responsible for putting forth all the information when you're audited? And how does that kind of trickle down to sub-manufacturers who are providing you those components?
Happy to get started on that one. The industry's perspective is that the name on the tin is who's responsible for reporting it to ENISA and for maintaining those specifics about why or how it's actually being attested to. The reality is that the duty flows down to all of the components that are a part of that, because those are whom is going to be requested for the relevant data necessary to approve and attest that it is actually going to be CRA compliant.
So liability is direct for those people
Correct.
whose name is on the tin, but it's indirect for all those people upstream who are providing firmware.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, I was a yes.
Do we
also
get
a
your
yes.
question? Anybody else? Any further questions from the crowd? I've got plenty of questions, so I'm going to carry on. Yeah, we've talked about getting ready, and we didn't hear from you on that subject, Dario, which is, what are you telling your customers right now, you know, the people you're consulting, about getting ready, you know? And I assume that there's got to be a strong element of, you know, cybersecurity defense must be commensurate with the risk involved. And by that I mean, you know, you've got several levels within the CRA, you know, the lowest level allowing for self-attestation. It moves upward from there until you get into critical products. You know, how are you talk to us about the people at the bottom of that? You know, what can they do, you know, to ensure that they're in compliance?
Yeah, so I talked about the talent problem a couple times already, and I think that at the smaller maturity as well as lower turnover, that's a real challenge. They're over 10 million and over 50 people, but they're not multi-billion-dollar, so they don't have a huge product security team. So for those folks, the real messaging is stop talking, start doing. It's really that simple. Just start putting some program in place that you can start feeling like you're getting ahead of the problem. Mike and I were talking in the back that it's not too late, but you're certainly pushing the envelope on the timing. It's close to midnight. Yeah, we should start moving the needle forward. So just get started has been the current messaging. How to get started is essentially to look at the kind of 6 or 7 specific outcomes that CRA is requiring you to document. Pick the one that you need the most help with, go get help with those. Pick the ones you don't need much help with and start on those internally. And eventually you're going to end up with something that looks better than it was before. The other side of the puzzle, like the medium-sized organizations, what we see there is they have a product security team. Maybe it's actually new, like in the last 5 or 10 years, they've stood up a product security team. And ultimately, they are being faced with this burden of just needing to do too much with not enough folks. So that is where like actual just processes and automation and technology can really help 5 people do the work of 15 people. Once you've figured it out once, you spent the 30 minutes or 30 hours to figure out how to automate a particular problem, that becomes value that you get to use in your team consistently. And then we have folks at the very high level where they're they're much more concerned about an existential risk to their organization because of the potential fine to CRA, and they're actually probably putting in more work than the medium-sized ones. They're spending a tremendous amount of internal capital on achieving that because the risk of the turnover fine is huge.
Right.
It is huge. And so for those types of organizations, I don't really have to tell them to get started. I usually have to have the conversation with them around what is going to be the highest output effort for your program right now. Let's go do that, and then let's move to the next highest output one, because there's usually so much to do that we just have to prioritize based on what's going to have the highest output for your program.
Right. Simon, did you want to answer? Oh, Michael, go ahead.
And maybe another way to get started now, which is relatively fresh, 8 days old, is that the Commission actually did publish a draft guideline for CRA implementation, right? So it's a draft. So I would definitely say, go get it, read it, and I think that's another way to get started as well. That is available to you now since March 3rd. So and it will evolve, it will change, but at least you get some idea where it's going, and that can help you as well from an implementation perspective.
Right. I'm going to start to bring us to a close here and ask each of you for sort of final thoughts on the CRA and SBOM management, and we'll start with you, Simon.
Thank you. Yeah, my final thoughts are that this year we will see providers such as Telit having this tooling available. We don't actually have our cybersecurity team here at the show, which is a shame, but they exist. They're based in Trieste in Italy, so we're actively working on that. Probably out of fear. I didn't realize that. They're probably working out of fear. But seriously, the RED cybersecurity is a great initiative. I think all of the security changes that we see in the 5G networking, that's really been beefed up in terms of 5G standalone network and device security helps us. And now with the CRA reporting requirements coming along, I see that in over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, we've made massive leaps in terms of the security that we're delivering to our customers, and that's us collectively. So yeah, that's my final thought. I'm actually very happy to see what's going on. I think
Great
it's
stuff.
all very positive.
Great stuff.
Thank you, Keith.
Michael, turn to you.
Yeah, my final thought would be, or the statement I would have is, well, hope is not a strategy when it comes to CRA. So do it. You have to get your feet wet. You have to do and get started. I had conversations with customers as recently as late last year from Spain, for example, who were very adamant that, the timeline will be different for Spain, and it's not the same, and that's not true, right? So there's no exceptions, there's no grandfathering anymore. There was some grandfathering at some point in a draft before the December 2024 final version came out, but it has been removed, right? So you have an obligation. It's harmonized. It's the EU. There's no differences, So again, just get started. Get started quickly. Clock is ticking. Again, it's not. Hope is not a strategy here.
Dario, toss to you.
So I was here 2 years ago, and I have to say that it is moving in the right direction. The number of folks who don't know much about product security regulations is declining. It is still too large, though. So the first real recommendation I would have is tell a friend. Tell a friend, tell a peer who's in another company that maybe isn't moving as fast as you are or isn't aware of the impending regulations. I have at least spoken to maybe 40% of the people I speak to. CR what? And that's wild to me. So we all can do a little bit better on the security side of just telling a friend and moving it along a little bit. I would echo what you just said. Do something, get started is important. I assume most folks are already started, but it's certainly not too late to finish that process. And I have to echo the part that we started with, which was you do eventually need to scale whatever program you put in place. And the only way to scale something is through automation, because we're not getting the budgets necessary to add people to scale it. So you need to find ways to automate it through process, through people, and through technology. I think that's really the only way to accomplish it.
Great stuff, guys. Hey, I learned a lot, and I appreciate your time. Can't thank you enough. Simon, Michael, Dario, thanks so much, and thank you especially in the audience. Thanks, guys.
Thank you both.